Hi guys, and welcome to this video. In this one we will continue with the web development career path on Codecademy, and in this one we will complete the loops section in this JavaScript module. So in this course you will learn how to use for and while loops to execute blocks of code multiple times. We have one lesson section, then we have a project section, and at the end we have a quiz section. Let's start with the lesson section. So loops. A loop is a programming tool that repeats a set of instructions until a specified condition, called a stopping condition, is reached. As a programmer, you will find that you rely on loops all the time. You will hear the generic term iterate when referring to loops. Iterate simply means to repeat. When we need to reuse a task in our code, we often bundle that action in a function. Similarly, when we see that a process has to repeat multiple times in a row, we write a loop. Loops allows us to create efficient code that automates processes to make scalable, manageable programs. As illustrated in the diagram, loops iterate or repeat an action until a specified condition is met. When the condition is met, the loop stops and the computer moves on to the next part of the script. Okay, so here is the loop diagram. So we are looping over, and if you are hungry, you then eat, and when you meet this condition, are you full? So if you full and the condition is yes, then you get out of the loop. And now let's proceed to the next exercise. Repeating tasks manually. Before we write our own loops, let's take a moment to develop an appreciation for loops. The best way to do that is by showing you how cumbersome it would be if a repeated task required you to type out the same code single time. Instructions: create the variable vacation spots and assign its value to an array of 3 strings naming places you would like to visit. Okay, let's create the variable and let's assign an array to it with 3 items with the values string. So places you would like to visit. So let's take for example Madrid, New York, and London. Okay, that should be fine. Next, console log each time in vacation spots. Since we don't know loops yet, we have to console log each element in the array separately. Okay, let's go. So let's log the first item. So use the index number. Now let's log the second item, and now let's log the last item. Update our code. Here are the 3 items. Nice work. Now imagine that the vacation list has 100 places on it. Logging each array element to the console by hand would be a tedious task. In the next exercise, we will learn how to make things more efficient with the for loops. Okay, that should be all for this one. Let's proceed to the next one and let's learn about for loop. The for loop. Instead of writing out the same code over and over again, like we saw in the previous exercise, loops allow us to tell computers to repeat a given block of code on its own. One way to give computers these instructions is with a for loop. The typical for loop includes an iterator variable that usually appears in all three expressions. The iterator variable is initialized, checked against the stopping condition, and assigned a new value on each loop iteration. Iterator variables can have any name, but it is best practice to use a descriptive variable name. A for loop contains three expressions separated by a semicolon inside the parentheses. Here is the example. An initialization starts the loop and can also be used to declare the iterator variable. A stopping condition is the condition that iterator variable is evaluated against. If the condition evaluates to true, the code block will run, and if it evaluates to false, the code will stop and we will exit the loop. An iteration statement is used to update the iterator variable on each loop. Here is the example of the for loop. First we have the iterator variable, then we have a stopping condition, and at the end we have an iteration statement that is used to update the iterator variable on each loop. In this example, the output would be the following. So first we have 0, print 0, we iterate by 1, so this variable is now 1, so 1, 2, 3, and when it gets to 4 is less than 4, which is false, and that's why the 4 isn't printed here, and we exit the loop at that point. Let's break down the example. The initialization is let counter equals 0, so the loop will start counting at 0. The stopping condition is if counter is less than 4, meaning the loop will run as long as the iterator variable counter is less than 4. The iteration statement is counter plus plus. This means after each loop, the value of counter or iterator will increase by 1. For the first iteration, counter will equal 0, and for the second iteration, counter will equal 1, and so on. The code block is inside of the curly braces. So this is the code block. Console log, counter variable, will execute until the condition evaluates to false. The condition will be false when counter is greater than or equal to 4. The point that the condition becomes false is sometimes called the stop condition. This for loop makes it possible to write 0, 1, 2, and 3 programmatically. Now make your own. Create a program that loops from 5 to 10 and logs each number to the console. Okay, let's create our own for loop. So for curly braces, let I equals, they want us to loop from 5 to 10, so 5 semicolon as long as I is less than 11, because we want 10 to be countable. And now I plus plus console.log I, and now let's run our code, and we got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, let's proceed to the next exercise. Looping in reverse. What if we want the for loop to log 3 to 1 and then 0? With simple modifications to the expressions, we can make our loop run backward. To run a backward for loop, we must set the iterator variable to the highest desired value in the initialization expression, set the stopping condition for when the iterator variable is less than the desired amount. The iterator should decrease in intervals after each iteration. Make a for loop that loops backwards, printing 3 to 0 to the console. Use the greater than or equals to comparison operator in your stopping condition and the minus minus operator in your iteration statement. It is equal to 3 up to 0. greater than or equal to 0, and here decrease the value of the iterator by 1. And now let's run our code, and here we got 3, 2, 1 and 0. Okay, let's proceed to the next one. Looping through arrays. For loops are very handy for iterating over data structures. For example, we can use a for loop to perform the same operation on each element on an array. Arrays hold lists of data like customer names or product information. Imagine we owned a store and wanted to increase the price of every product in our catalog. That could be a lot of repeating code, but by using a for loop to iterate through the array, we could accomplish this task easily. To loop through each element in an array, a for loop should use the array's length property in its condition. Check out the example below to see how for loops iterate on arrays. Here is the example. So here we have the array. Okay, and here is the condition. And then you console log animals and you use iterator as index number. This example would give you the following output. So first item, second one, and then the last one. In the loop above, we have named our iterator variable I. This is a variable naming convention you will see in a lot of loops. When we use I to iterate through arrays, we can think of it as being shorthand for the word index. Notice how our stopping condition checks that I is less than animals.length, which is greater by 1 than the index of the last item in the array. Remember that arrays are zero indexed. The index of the last element of an array is equivalent to the length of that array minus 1. If we try to access an element at the index of animals length, we will have gone too far, and that's exactly what we need. In this case, with for loops, it is easier for us to work with elements in arrays. Write a for loop that iterates through our vacation spots array using I as the iterator variable. Okay, so for loop less than array name and then the length property I plus plus okay, that should be fine. My bad, I didn't read everything we should do. Inside the block of the for loop, use console.log to log each element in the vacation spots array after the string I would love to visit. For example, the first round of the loop should print I would love to visit Bali to the console. Okay. Okay, let's print that string right here. Now let's use the concatenation. And that should be fine. Yep. And now let's proceed to the next one. Nested loops. When we have a loop running inside another loop, we call that a nested loop. One use for a nested for loop is to compare the elements in two arrays. For each round of the outer for loop, the inner for loop will run completely. Let's look at an example of a nested for loop. Okay, here is the example. Let's think about what is happening in the nested loop in our example. For each element in the outer loop array, my array, so this one, the inner loop will run in its entirety comparing the current element from the outer array, my array, to each element in the inner array, your array. When it finds a match, it prints a string to the console. Now it is your turn to write a nested loop. Okay. Imagine you're a big programmer for a social media platform. You have been tasked with building a prototype for a mutual followers program. You will need two arrays of friends from two mock users so that you can extract the names of the followers who exist in both lists. Make a variable called Bob's followers and set it equal to an array with 4 strings representing the names of Bob's friends. Okay, let's create our array variable first with 4 string names. So John, Jack, Sarah, and Sam. Update our code. Make a variable called Tina's followers and set it equal to an array with 3 strings representing the names of Tina's friends. Make exactly 2 of these the same as 2 of the friends in the Bob's followers array. Okay, so the second array with 3 strings, and let's use 2 same friend names from the Bob's followers, Sarah and Sam. And now let's use a name unique to Tina's followers. Let's use Bob. Run our code. Create a third variable named mutual followers and set it to an empty array. Okay, so let mutual followers equal to an empty array. Run our code. And now create a nested loop that iterates through Bob's followers as the array for the outer loop and Tina's followers as the array for the inner loop. If the current element from the outer loop is the same as the current element from the inner loop, push that element into the mutual followers array. Okay, let's start with the outer for loop. So let I equals 0. First we are looping through the Bob's followers array. And now let's write our inner for loop so we can loop through Tina's followers array. And now let's write our logic. So if Bob's followers item is equal to Tina's followers item, then push that item to the mutual followers array. So dot push Bob's followers item to the mutual followers array. I think this should be okay. Let's run our code and everything is fine, but let's console.log the mutual followers array so we can see. So Sarah and Sam are the mutual friends. So Sarah right here, and Sam right here. Okay, now let's continue to the next exercise. The while loop. You are doing great. We are going to teach you about a different type of loop, the while loop. To start, let's convert a for loop into a while loop. Here is the example. Let's break down what is happening with our while loop syntax. So the counter2 variable is declared before the loop. We can access it inside our while loop since it is in the global scope. We start our loop with the keyword while followed by our stopping condition right here, or test condition. This will be evaluated before each round of the loop. While the condition evaluates to true, the block will continue to run. Once it evaluates to false, the loop will stop. Next, we have our loops code block, which prints counter2 to the console and increments counter2 variable. What would happen if we didn't increment counter2 inside our block? And in that case, counter2 would always have its initial value of 1, and that would mean the testing condition counter2 less than 4 would always evaluate to true and our loop would never stop running. This is also called an infinite loop, and it is something we always want to avoid. Infinite loops can take up all of your computer's processing power, potentially freezing your computer. So you may be wondering when to use a while loop. The syntax of a for loop is ideal when we know how many times the loop should run, but we don't always know this in advance. Think of eating like a while loop. When you start taking bites, you don't know the exact number you will need to become full. Rather, you will eat while you are hungry. In situations when we want a loop to execute an undetermined number of times, while loops are the best choice. Okay, instructions. Below the cards array, declare a variable, current card, with the let keyword but doesn't assign it a value. So just declare the variable for now. Create a while loop with a condition that checks if the current card doesn't have the value spade. So while okay, if it has the value spade, inside the block of your while loop, add the following line of code. Okay, let's copy this one. Math_floor math_random method multiplied by 4 will give us a random number from 0 to 3. We will use this number to index the cards array and assign the value of current card to a random element from that array. Okay, update our code. My bad. We need to check if it doesn't have the value spade. And now the last task. Awesome, your loop is running, but you cannot tell because it doesn't output anything. Let's add a console log statement to our while block. Inside the block, after you assign current card a new value, log current card to the console. For fun, you can run your code a few times and see how the output changes. Okay, let's console.log current card variable, update our code. So in this case we took 2 runs. Let's run it again. Now we took only 1 run. Let's run it again. So 3 runs and so on and so forth. So that should be all for this one. Let's proceed to the next exercise. Do while statements. In some cases, you want a piece of code to run at least once and then loop based on a specific condition after its initial run. This is where the do while statement comes in. A do while statement says to do a task 1 and then keep doing it until a specified condition is no longer met. The syntax for a do while statement looks like this. Okay, so here is the syntax. In this example, the call block makes changes to the count string variable by appending the string form of the I variable to it. First, the call block after the do keyword is executed once. So this right here. Then the condition is evaluated. If the condition evaluates to true, the block will execute again. The looping stops when the condition evaluates to false, of course. Note that the while and do while loop are different. Unlike the while loop, do while will run at least once whether or not the condition evaluates to true. Okay, so a do while with a stopping condition that evaluates to false. It will first run once before it evaluates to false, and a while loop with a stopping condition that evaluates to false, and this one will never run because we have a false as the result of this condition right here. So true isn't equal false. And now we would like a program to simulate part of the cake baking process. Depending on the recipe, a different number of cups of sugar is required. Create the variable cups of sugar needed and assign it a number value of your choosing. The cups of sugar must be added to the butter one at a time. Declare the variable cups added and assign it the value of 0. Okay, program. And I forgot to declare a cups of sugar needed variable first and assign it any number. So let's take 11. Okay, we have a sweet tooth, so we want to add at least 1 cup of sugar to the batter even if the value of cups of sugar needed is 0. Create a do while loop which increments cups added by 1 while cups added is less than cups of sugar needed. Okay, let's create do while loop. So we need to increment cups added. So increment cups added by 1, and while cups added is less than cups of sugar needed, while cups added is less than cups of sugar needed. Let's run our code, and that looks fine. And now let's proceed to the next exercise. The break keyword. Imagine we are looking to adopt a dog. We plan to go to the shelter every day for a year and then give up. But what if we meet our dream dog on day 65? We don't want to keep going to the shelter for the next 300 days just because our original plan was to go for a whole year. In our code, when we want to stop a loop from counting to execute, even though the original stopping condition we wrote for our loop hasn't been met, we can use the keyword break. The break keyword allows programs to break out of the loop from within the loop's block. Here is the keyword. Let's check out the syntax of a break keyword. Okay, we have example. This is the output for the above example code. So in this example right here, at the beginning, let I is equal 0. So we are looping 3 times. That's why we have 3 console logs of bananas. So 0, console log, we increment the value by 1. So 1 is less than 2, console log bananas. Then we increment the I variable once again, then the I is equal to, then we check if 2 is greater than 2, which is false, so we log bananas once again, and then we increment it to 3, the I variable, and then we hit this condition which evaluates to true, so 3 is greater than 2, and then we hit the break keyword and we exit the for loop. Break statements can be especially helpful when we are looping through large data structures. With breaks, we can add test conditions besides the stopping conditions and exit the loop when they are met. Log each element from array per array in a for loop with the iterator variable I. So for loop, iterator variable I, array per array dot length I plus plus console.log I, and that should be okay. Console.log array per array, and then use the I for the index number. So this is how we loop through array. We already did that. After the for loop, log the string, and if you don't know, now you know, to the console. Okay, let's log that string to the console. Note, since there is a single quote character in our string, we can use double quotes around the string to make sure characters print. Okay, we used double quotes. Okay, add a break inside your loops block that breaks out of the loop if the element at the current index in the array per array is notorious big, and let's add that if statement. So break the loop if we hit this string, and let's run our code, and let's try to move this down. Okay, now it looks fine. Okay, we moved the if-else statement below the console log, and now when we hit this item right here, first it will be printed to the console, and then it will check the if statement, and if that evaluates to true, then we will exit the for loop and we will never log this last 2pack value. Okay, let's proceed to the next exercise. And now we have the review exercise of everything we did so far, like usual. Great job. In this lesson, we learned how to write cleaner code with loops. You now know loops perform repetitive actions, so we don't have to code that process manually every time. How to write for loops with an iterator variable that increments or decrements. How to use a for loop to iterate through an array. A nested for loop is a loop inside another loop. While loops allow for different types of stopping conditions. Stopping conditions are crucial for avoiding infinite loops. Do while loops run code at least once, only checking the stopping condition after that first execution. The break keyword allows programs to leave a loop during the execution of its block. Okay, that should be all. Let's proceed to the project section called whale talk. Take a phrase like turpentine, a turtles, and translate it into its whale talk equivalent to this phrase. There are a few simple rules for translating text to whale language. There are no consonants, only vowels excluding Y. the U's and E's are extra long, so we must double them in our program. Once we have converted text to the whale language, the result is sunk slowly, as is a custom in the ocean. To accomplish this translation, we can use our knowledge of loops, and let's get started. If you get stuck during this project or would like to see an experienced developer work through it, click Get Help to see a project walkthrough video. And that's why I'm here, so I can help you complete this project. Create a variable named input that is equal to any phrase you would like. This variable will contain the text you want to translate into whale doc. So let input, let's type the ocean is beautiful. Now whales only speak in vowels, so you need an array of vowels to be extracted from the input variable. Set the array equal to a variable named vowels that will not be updated. Note, whales don't consider y a vowel. Okay, let's use const for this one. So vowels equal to array, and now let's type the vowels. Okay. Create a variable named result array and set it equal to an empty array. This will serve as a place to store the vowels from the input string. Create a loop to iterate through each letter of the input variable text. In a later step, we will compare each letter with our vowels array. Okay, let's create the for loop that will iterate through the input string. This should be 0. To check your work, log the iterator numbered position inside the for loop and run your code. Let's console log the I variable. This should count the number of characters in your input string. Comment out this code when you're ready to move on. Okay, let's log the console, and we have 22 characters in this string. Okay, we can comment this one out. Create a nested for loop inside of the for loop you just wrote. Make the inner loop iterate through the vowels array each time the outer loop runs. Okay, let's copy this one, and now let's change this to j. So j less than vowels length, and j plus plus. This will enable you to check each letter of input against all the vowels elements during each iteration. To check your work, log the iterator number positions inside the inner for loop and run your code. You should see 0 through 4 repeatedly because vowels is 5 elements long. Let's see. Run our code, and yeah, we got 0 through 4 22 times. Okay, completed. Inside the second for loop, write a code block that compares the input letter to every letter in the vowels array. Okay, let's comment this one out, and now let's write our if-else statement. We are checking if input I is equal to vowels J. Okay. Whales double their E's and the U's in their language. Write an if statement that checks if each letter in the input string is equal to E. If so, push input to the result array. Note, this statement belongs after the inner for loop block inside the outer for loop. This is because you only want to perform this check once for every letter in the input. Okay, so let's go right here and we should check if each letter in the input string is equal to E, and if so, then we need to push that one to the result array. Okay, next you want to double the letter U, so you must mimic the code from the last step, recreate the if statement but modify it so it pushes the letter U a second time. Okay, let's copy this one and just change this to U. At the bottom of the program, log result array to the console. Let's update our code. We have 3 E's and 2 U's. And right here I forgot to push the character to the result array. And now let's save our code. And now, as you can see, for every E we have 2 E's right here, right here, right here, and for every U we also have double use characters, so right here and right here. So 1 E, 2 and 3, so we have 6 in total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and we have 1 U and the second one, so we have 4 in total. Okay, now this looks fine. These if statements we could also write like this if you want to write everything in one if statement. So like this, update our code, same result, 2, 4, 6 and 4 use. Okay, notice when we log the array, the output has commas between each letter. To produce proper whale language, we want to capitalize the array elements and put them together as one string. Okay, let's fix that. So we should use the join method. with the single or double quotes as a parameter, and then let's capitalize those letters. So let's use to uppercase JavaScript method. And now let's update our code, and as you can see, all the characters are converted to string, and here we have 2, 4 and 6 is and 2, 4 use. Okay, run the program and seeing the output out loud, you officially speak whale language. To confirm, if you change the value of input to turpentine and turtles, the whale version would read this right here. Let's try this one out. Try other tests like hi human to get this, or a whale of a deal to get this. Okay, let's first try this one. Let's copy this. Yep, we got that, right? So let's change this to human. IUUA, IUUA, okay. That's also correct. Now let's try this last string. Let's copy this. And it is the same as ours. So everything looks fine. We completed the loops project. Now let's proceed to the quiz. So loops quiz, and we have 9 questions in total. You want to run a code block at least once, then loop as long as a condition remains true. Which kind of loop would you use? So this one should be a do while statement, correct? What would the output of this block of code be? So we have a animal variable with a cat string. We are looping over the characters of this string. Then we are console logging each letter. So this one should be the right answer. What is incorrect about the code block? Let's see. We have commas instead of semicolons. The condition of the loop should be separated by semicolons, not commas. Okay, nice job. What problem is caused by this code block? And right here we created an infinite loop. The code won't run because the stop condition is less than the start condition. You cannot run a loop without an array. I equals 10 and I greater than 0 should be switched. The code will loop forever because I will always be greater than 0 and 10. This code will create an infinite loop because it lacks a stop condition. Okay, it's correct, of course. Which statement is true about while loops? While loops only run while the condition is false. While loops always loop over a code block a known amount of times. While loops evaluate a condition for however long it is true, and the looping stops when the condition is false. While loops will run at least once, then will run again if their condition is true. That should do while do. And this one should be the right answer, of course. What will be the result of the code block? Let's see. Array with 3 items. Social media index, and we should get Instagram, Facebook and Twitter right here, correct. What do nested for loops do? Nested for loops allow us to double check our if-else statements. Nested for loops run the same code twice. Nested for loops allows us to run multiple for loops at once. And nested for loops are bad because they run forever. And this one should be the right answer, of course. What is the general purpose of a loop? Loops automatically iterate a block of code based on conditions. All loops help the computer make decisions automatically. Loops read and recreate code automatically, and loops iterate through arrays to find elements. And this one should be the right answer. We automate repetition. And the last question, which statement is true about for loops? Let's see. For loops can never result in an infinite loop. False. We saw that in one of the previous questions. For loops always count from 0 upwards. Also false. For loops are appropriate when looping a predetermined number of times. For loops always run an unknown number of times, and this is the right answer, of course. And that's it. We completed the quiz with maximum result 100%, and that should be all for this video. We completed the loops section in the JavaScript module. Thanks for watching, and see you guys in the next one.